Now, after doing this for a long time, I really know what's going on and I know what works, and I don't kind of, especially with my clients, veer out of my lane. I'm testing things myself. If it works, I've got good partners. We've gone through the due diligence. We start small, we add to it, we get results, we go through this full cycle, we roll it out to a client, and then we build and we build and we build and rinse, lather, repeat. And you do that for enough time, and the result at the end is quite meaningful.
Welcome to the On the Rise podcast, where we talk about time freedom, passive investing through real estate, finance, and mindset. Let's dive in. Quick disclaimer as always, I am not a CPA, I am not an attorney or a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. I am not telling you or anyone else what to do. The views and opinions expressed in these podcasts are provided for education and informational purposes only and are not necessarily the views of my employer. All right, welcome back On the Rise, listeners. Thank you again for jumping into yet another episode here. I've got another amazing guest with me, as I do always, right? I've got Mikkel Thorup. Mikkel, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jeremy. Happy to be here. I'm excited for our conversation and looking forward to it. And should be awesome.
Yeah, looking forward to it as well. So Mikkel is the world's most sought after expat consultant. He focuses on helping high net worth individuals legally mitigate tax liabilities, obtain second residencies and citizenships in other countries. He assembles a portfolio of foreign investments. He can talk about, international real estate, timber plantations, agricultural land, and other hard money tangible assets. So Mikkel, you've got quite the background here. And this conversation is, to be honest, this is very unique. Okay. I've never had somebody, on the show that, has the type of background that you do, in terms of explaining different ways to, legally mitigate, tax liabilities and, shelter in foreign countries. So maybe you can kind of, give our listening audience the 101, right? In terms of what you're focused on and how you can help serve and support potential high net worth investors.
Sure. So most of my work is focused on what I affectionately call the 4+1. The 4+1 is the immigration. So, the residencies, the citizenship, a second passport, things like this. But when you're going to get a second residency or second citizenship, you usually have to do it through some type of investment. So that is often a piece of real estate. So we focus on the offshore real estate. So all of the investment angle. But then you're going to buy the real estate and you need to find a way to, title it. Are you going to title it in your own name? Are you going to do it in an LLC? Are you going to title it in a foreign structure? You want to protect your downside. So this is the wealth protection side of things. So this is number 3 in our 4+1. And now you have this asset and maybe you're generating cash flow from it. Maybe you are going to sell it at some point. So now we have the tax reporting. So, we help people with the reporting requirements. If you're an American, back to the US, or if you're a Canadian, depends if you're a Canadian tax resident or not. And then you have the tax obligations of the country where the asset is, the immovable product is. And then you have the tax obligations of the country that it's structured in. So we need to do the reporting for all of that. So that's the 4. And then, Jeremy, the +1 is the lifestyle. It's, if you're going to go through all this and get the immigration and structure it and buy the real estate and everything like that, let's make sure we do it in a place that you actually like and enjoy and want to spend time in, and it speaks to you and your family and your values. So that's the +1. So that's really the work, is focused on these 4+1 types of things. And this lifestyle is the thread that ties it all together. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And Mikkel, I just have to throw this out there because I'm totally new to this kind of idea of becoming an expat. What are some of maybe the biggest, misconceptions, that you hear from other investors, as it relates to, this concept of offshore investing, taxation, these, second citizenships, all these types of things are all just very new to me.
Amazing. So let's start with the lexicon, just so that we're all on the same page. We know exactly what we're talking about when we say the word expat. So, expat, now there is how we use it in a slang, which literally just means moving to another country with the expectation that you will either go home at some point or move on to another country. So we're not migrating to the country. We're not, living there full time. You might be, but you're often, you know, plan on going to other places. So this is a little bit different than an immigrant who kind of like leaves everything behind, moves to a new country, they get a citizenship there. Do you think of someone coming into the US, they're migrating to the US. For us, we might be in one country for a couple of years, then we get a job offer, we move somewhere else. Like, for example, I've lived in 9 different countries over the last 25 years. I was 8 years in the Middle East. I've been in Panama City, Panama for the last 6 years. I was in Australia and New Zealand for 4 years. I've lived all over. Now, I'm pretty settled in Panama, so maybe I am, migrated here. I don't know, but this is very different. Sometimes you will hear to expatriate. So to expatriate is actually a legal term where you're giving up your citizenship. So Americans often expatriate so that they don't have filing requirements back to the IRS anymore. Now, we can help with this, but that's not really the focus of my work. I have lawyers who can do that, but really my work is more focused on moving offshore and moving to another country and then investing in that country and having the banking there. Now, on the same vein of offshore, so what does offshore mean? Offshore means outside of your country, in a country that has favorable tax laws and strong asset protection laws in your favor. Okay. And then I would add to that in a politically stable country, because there's no point in moving to a country or moving your assets to a country, even if they have zero taxation, but it's a war zone or something like that. So those are kind of the three things that we're looking for when we use the word offshore. So I'll pause there for a second, then we can kind of continue. But does that make sense? The vocabulary, the lexicon.
Yeah, it totally does make sense. And I also think about maybe those countries out there that are, heavy inflationary environment countries as well, probably would be one that, you'd want to avoid also.
100%. We're very focused on protecting the downside. And a big part of that is inflation, this invisible tax that eats up your purchasing power because of, money printers go burr. So, we're very mindful of these things. And this is also circles back on why I'm very much into tangible assets, because tangible assets have this ability to keep up with inflation often.
Yeah, it makes total sense. So let's talk about like an ideal type of a client for you. What would that ideal client look like? Because I would suspect that you've got people that are they have net worth of 9 figures or more, might be a good ideal candidate. But what about folks that maybe have a net worth of a couple million? Does it make sense in that case as well?
Yeah, so I mean, at our work, we have a couple of different levels where I'm able to assist people, and they are kind of focused on the net worth brackets, let's say. So we have a program where it's a do it yourself. We provide all of the information, special reports, webinars. We have a Rolodex of all the lawyers and accountants, everybody we work with. All the information is there, and you do it yourself. If you're kind of a do it yourself type of person, you like figuring it out, this is the helping hand to kind of get it all going. This is kind of that sub $1 million or even sub $500,000 range. Then we do a group coaching program. So it's 1 on 15 and it's a done with you service. This is usually around that $1 million, $2 million mark. And, it's a very nice program. Meet a couple times a month via Zoom, and I walk you through everything. We do 1 month on offshore banking, another month on offshore real estate, another month on immigration, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, throughout the year. It's live. I go through the Q&A, everything like that. Then my private client, my private consulting work is what I actually started the business with almost 10 years ago. And this is the one-on-one type of thing. This is the net worth around $10 million plus. And it's where I'm actually working with you. I'm designing the plan. I'm building out the team of all of the lawyers, accountants, property developers, precious metal depositories, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that we need. And then I'm joining you for every single call with the professional. So I ask questions on your behalf. I translate what I affectionately call English to English. So, legalese to layman speech. I have this amazing ability of making things make sense, and I stay with you through the entire program. So it's kind of built into 3 phases. And that's kind of the three levels so that we're able to serve our clients, depending on their net worth range. But it's all focused on the same thing. It's all focused on that 4+1, building the portfolio, getting the second residencies, being tax compliant, being able to move the money securely, and then the lifestyle that ties it together.
Makes total sense. What are maybe two or three of the most popular, countries that you see, US citizens, seeking, that dual citizenship? And then kind of beyond that, what are they looking to invest into, when they move into those secondary countries?
Sure. So we'll even take a step back and go back on lexicon. So citizenship is an amazing opportunity, but it's really hard to get. Okay. Citizenship is when you can say, I am Brazilian or I am El Salvadorian or I am Panamanian, right? That's when you get the passport. Usually, what we're doing is we're getting what's called a permanent residency before that. The permanent residency allows you to live, work, and do business in that country forever. There's usually some type of requirement, so maybe a minimum stay in the country. For example, Panama, where I live, to maintain your permanent residency, you need to visit 1 day every 2 years. So, I have clients who come in and out of town. You take me out for a nice steak dinner, we go, hang out, and then, you get on an airplane, you continue your journey, and you've gone through your requirements for the next 2 years to maintain your residency. Now, after 5 years of holding a permanent residency, you get to make the application for a citizenship. If you're approved, then you will get the passport, and then you'll have that for the rest of your life. Now, the popular countries, to go back to your original question, the popular countries are places like Panama, where I am today. Panama is extremely popular. It is very safe, good medical facilities, organic food. You've got the Caribbean, the Atlantic. You've got the Pacific side. You've got the mountains. It's a hub airport. It's a very good options for people looking for a new country. And oh, by the way that we do it is basically a tax-free country as well. So the huge, huge advantages. Another very popular country is Costa Rica. Everybody knows Costa Rica. They've probably gone on vacation in Costa Rica. We've got some developments there, some off grid communities and stuff in the highlands. That's a very nice option. People like that. We're also investing pretty heavily in Paraguay, which is a small, call it heart shaped country in the very center of South America. It's not on the coastline, but it's very beautiful in its own right. Very affordable, very excellent tax system there. And, I just got back a few weeks ago. I took a group of about 50 investors down there to check out the country, and everybody went crazy for it. Everybody loved the country so much. So there's some good options. We do focus a lot on the Caribbean and Latin America, but that's really because what's going on in Europe is a bit of a dumpster fire. Asia is very far and very foreign. Um, you know, Other places, South Pacific, also very far and, not really, what we would say is out of the pan and into the fire in some of those places. But Latin America, there's some true freedom to be found down here.
I'm Zach Captainstall, CEO and co-founder of Rise 48 Equity. Our goal is to help you protect and grow your wealth by investing in large multifamily apartment buildings. We do all the work as far as sourcing these large apartment buildings from the brokers, doing all of the on-site management with our vertically integrated property management company, doing all the renovations with our vertically integrated construction company. We completely rebrand the exteriors. We will renovate the interiors to our full platinum level scope, which increases the value of the asset to get that profit margin for the investors. If you'd like to learn about how you can partner with us on these exciting opportunities, you can go to our website and set up a call with our team.
I know you talk a little bit about, investing in tangible, hard money assets like timber and farmland, real estate. How do those types of investments, compare or not compare, to traditional assets in terms of, long-term wealth preservation?
You have to have definitely a long-term mindset with a lot of these things. You also need to have a good attitude to understand things and to put a little bit more work on the front end. But I mean, your audience is very responsible people, and I don't think rolling up their sleeves and learning something is without outside of their reach by any stretch of the imagination. This is about personal responsibility. Like you need to understand these things. For example, we have about 6,000 acres of timberland in Colombia, and our clients love it. And we're about to get on an airplane and go out to Colombia to see it. We're going to fly into Medellin and then out to Vichada, which is where the area is. And, this is a timber plantation with fast growing eucalyptus. Okay, there's a lot that needs to be understood. And, you need to, it's more of a business than just say an investment. It's not like just clicking a mouse on a stockbroker account or something like that. And suddenly you've bought something. You got to do a bit of due diligence. You got to, have your head on straight with these things, but the rewards can be substantial when you put in the work. And it's fun too. I like this type of investing. Most of my clients are the adventurous types, They like visiting the countries, they like meeting the new partners, they like studying it and trying to find something that they'll actually have an advantage on. If I look at the stock market and you look at the stock market, I mean, maybe we'll get lucky or something like that, but I can also go to Vegas and I can, choose 17 or black or red or I don't know, and maybe I'll do well. But like for me, a lot of it is just luck. So I like things where I have a huge competitive advantage. And for me, that is my 25 years of being an expat and investing overseas.
I know I appreciate that perspective, and I also appreciate that you're familiar with the country of Colombia. I did invest myself in a coffee plantation in Colombia, which is going really well, today. And I'm definitely a huge supporter, of investing in, hard money assets, including, having investments, in other parts of the world, like Colombia, for example. What has your financial worldview changed, since maybe back when you were, younger? I think a lot of people, their financial literacy, which is severely lacking, either comes from maybe some things they learned from their parents, maybe some things they picked up, and maybe high school or college if they went, right? Or really it's what they kind of read in the headline news that kind of shapes their, investment decisions, or whatever their financial advisor tells them to do. And that advisor is usually only advising them on Wall Street, institutional type, products, so to speak. So, how has your kind of financial worldview, really changed, since you became a 2 decade long expat?
So, I mean, I left Canada when I was 17. So, I mean, I didn't have a lot of experience in Canada. I mean, I grew up there, but as an adult, not very much. I didn't go the traditional route of university. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an accountant. I'm a consultant. I have full time lawyers who work for me for my firm. We're a 32-person firm. Um, my education, yeah, is very, very different. I kind of went the reading a lot of books route, studying actual people who have actually done things opposed to textbooks. So a lot of biographies, a lot of real case studies. I've read well over 2,000 books about investing and money and business and economics and things like this. I have a huge library in my house. I'm a massive, massive reader. And then number two is I've studied and apprenticed under really top-notch lawyers around the world. So, property developers, lawyers, accountants, I've had an opportunity to work directly under them and ask a lot of questions. This is the also nice thing about having my own podcast for 10 years. I have had an opportunity to interview so many smart people and ask questions that I found very, very interesting. And then number 3, just being a guinea pig and then just trying things, and it's okay. Especially with my own money, I've just gone crazy and tried lots of different things. Now with clients' money, I'm extremely conservative, but especially at the beginning, I tried, just throwing everything at the wall and see what sticks, and then I made a lot of mistakes and, my portfolios went up and my portfolios went down, and that was okay. Now after doing this for a long time, I really know what's going on and I know what works and I don't kind of, especially with my clients, veer out of my lane. I'm testing things myself. If it works, I've got good partners. We've gone through the due diligence. We start small, we add to it, we get results, we go through this full cycle, we roll it out to a client, especially my really sophisticated ones who are taking a little bit of risk. We're always very transparent with them. And then we build and we build and we build and rinse, lather, repeat. And you do that for enough time and the result at the end is quite meaningful.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that perspective. And it makes me think about, this concept of analysis by paralysis. And it sounds to me like you don't have that, right? You take risks, you learn from your mistakes, you fail forward, that type of thing. But you also understand, your own, risk tolerance as well. You understand that certain investments or opportunities, carry a different, risk profile. And, you're now able to teach others, really what types of mistakes to avoid because you've been, down multiple paths yourself, as an individual investor and contributor in the space.
100%. I mean, the big one for me is like we don't do anything with leverage. When you start looking at real estate portfolios, because we do a ton of real estate, most people, the way they teach it is, 5% down, 10% down, leverage, then re leverage and blah, 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 and then roll it for. It's like, no, I like my way much better. We buy really affordable properties. We buy on pre-construction and we have a very attractive schedule of fees. So you can actually get into it with very little money down, but it's no leverage. So if something happens, you're not going to go underwater on the property. And, I have my special way of doing this that has worked. But, we're buying beachfront properties in the northeast of Brazil for around $100,000. And this is lot plus land, front row on the beach for 100 grand. You start cash flowing on that, you're getting around 10% capital, 10% cash flow, and then capital appreciation can be 5, 6, 7%. Paraguay, we're buying apartments, 65, $70,000 for a one bedroom, maybe 80, 85,000 for a nice two bedroom with some extra room. Once again, you're cash flowing 9, 10% in year one. Capital appreciation, maybe 10% annual. You add those two numbers to up and it becomes quite meaningful. So Colombia, very good opportunities in Colombia. What a beautiful country with amazing human beings there. So warm and so loving people. Dark past, some bad things happened to them in their past, but that's not the fault of, everyday Colombians on the street. And so you get this dichotomy between, perception versus reality. And it's like I will actually go there and see and meet the people and take a look at all of these types of things, and I'm willing to, go into what others would consider risky, but because I've done the groundwork, it's actually not risky whatsoever. So once again, to go back to competitive advantage, these are things that we're able to do in our community that if you've, only stay in your, one town or city and you've never ventured overseas, or even out, to the next state or something like that, it's going to be very, very difficult.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your perspective there as well. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've come across in my life where, they have a certain perception about a country or a specific region in the world, but unless you've actually been there yourself, right, then your perception might not actually be the reality, right? And so I challenge my own children, with that kind of a thought process as well, is just because you hear it from somebody or you see it, from somewhere doesn't necessarily mean that that is the universal truth, in that particular region or area of the world. I know that you're a big fan of, getting educated, and then getting started, right? And so I'd love for you to kind of tell our listeners a little bit more about, you know, we're high achieving professionals in our own right. We're considering a global lifestyle. What's the first couple of actionable steps that we can take to start kind of building an international plan, for freedom and resilience and tax savings and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Sure. So I think that there are three major things that people should focus on, and this we'll call this the foundational types of pieces, and everything else kind of comes from these three pieces. All right, so we kind of start small, but it will have huge impact. So think of the 80-20 Pareto's law kind of thing. Okay, so number one is we do a lot of what we call plan B or economic plan B or financial plan B. We want to protect the downside. Okay. If things get bad or you don't like what's happening, you have something else overseas. So the first thing that we want to do is get a residency. This goes back to immigration, what we were saying before. Permanent residency in a country. This allows you to live, work, do business in that foreign country. Now, ideally, let's pick at a country that you actually like spending time in. I'm from Southwestern Ontario. I hate the snow. I'll go skiing or something like that. But then after that's it. I don't want to be driving in it. I don't want to be shoveling snow. So I like sunshine. I like beaches. I like, blue skies and white fluffy clouds year round. So for me, it's being somewhere near the beach. All right. So we want to get a permanent residency in a country that you enjoy spending time in. That's number one. Number two is in that country, let's get a second home for you. It doesn't have to be, $1 million or a multi-million dollar place, even just, a two-bedroom apartment, maybe a little space for a desk and stuff like that. You can keep working. This is kind of your bolt hole in the country. Now, this can also be good because if you want to apply for citizenship eventually, you're probably going to need to show an electricity bill and a home address and things like that. So we're already thinking ahead in our plan B. Now, the nice thing is if you can rent it out while you're not using it, put it in a short-term rental program or even a pool or something like that, then you can generate a bit of cash flow while you're not using it. And if you want to go on vacation, you've got your place there. We like having a little lock off room or a lock off closet or down in the parking garage, a little storage unit or something there. And you can keep a couple of suitcases with extra clothes and some personal effects and things like that. Now you've got that. All right. So we've got the permanent residency, so the legal right to be there. We have a roof over our heads. Well, we need access to capital. So what we like doing is either having an offshore bank account or an offshore precious metals account. So this would be your access to money. Now, having a bank account overseas is great and very important, but holding cash, I'm not such a big fan of. A little bit of money, 5 grand, 10 grand, 20 grand, fine. But I don't want to sit in, a $500,000 in cash, especially in the environment that we're in right now. So what we often do for clients is we set up a precious metals account overseas. Now, this is 100% allocated, 100% segregated, 100% insured. So you really own the metals. And the offshore depository just works as a custodian to hold it. And if ever needed, you can either sell the metals and get cash for it. And, if we look at the run up in precious metals, I think gold is up about 46% over the last year. And, silver is, even higher than that, over 50%. Silver is about $50 an ounce as we're talking. And gold, I was looking at gold's 4,100 or something right now. That's unbelievable. I mean, go tangible assets. And then you can sell this if you need to, but what's even more interesting is you can actually take a loan against it. And, you can check with your accountant, but in my opinion, taking a loan against there's no taxable event on this. So now you can pay it back later on and you don't actually have to liquidate the underlying asset so it can continue to grow for you. So once again, you've got a legal place to be, a roof over your head, and access to capital. If you can do those three things, you're going to be in a very, very good position. And, that's stuff that we're able to help clients set up from their living room without having to move anywhere or leave or do anything like that. And those are three really low hanging fruits that you can work on. Make sense?
Makes total sense. Yeah, I appreciate that, and that's a great breakdown. And Mikkel, this has been just an interesting conversation, one that I've not ever had before. And so I appreciate you kind of sharing with us and our listeners a little bit more about the potential of moving into kind of a dual residency and the benefits associated with that. What might be maybe one or two different ways that our listening audience can connect with you to learn more about kind of your strategies for becoming an expat?
Yeah, absolutely. I would encourage people to join our newsletter. We've got about a half a dozen different newsletters. So if you go to expatmoney.com, they're completely free to subscribe. We put out different content based on your needs. We have special ones for Paraguay, Brazil, we do a lot in the off-grid space, so, off-grid living, things like that. And then we have our main newsletter, EMS Pulse, which is focused on all the immigration and all the things really we've been talking about today. But if you go to expatmoney.com, that's great. The other one would be our podcast, which has been going for almost 10 years. It's called The Expat Money Show. So wherever you're listening to the podcast today, you should be able to look that up pretty easy. And then for precious metals, I quickly mentioned it. If you go to expatmoney.com/gold, you'll find a ton of information on that. I know that people are very excited and rightfully so about the amazing uptick in precious metals over the last year and a half. So expatmoney.com/gold will have a ton of information for you on that.
That's great. Well, we'll definitely put those links in the show notes for the episode. Mikkel, again, thank you so much for your time today.
Pleasure's all mine. I appreciate you having me on and happy to come back at any time if you want to explore these concepts more thoroughly.
Absolutely. And listeners, thank you again for jumping into another episode of the On the Rise podcast. We look forward to having you join us on the next episode.
Thank you for hanging out with us today and for listening to the On the Rise podcast. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on this show should be considered financial advice. Before making any financial decisions, please consult with a professional. This show is copyrighted by the On the Rise podcast. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.